on the storm's path. Joining us right now, meteorologist Damon Matson. Damon, thanks for being with us throughout the morning. In terms of strength, can you just talk to what a difference it makes that it has gone to a Category 3, but certainly still powerful enough to push some of that water ashore?
Yeah, exactly right. And the category at this point does not matter. The impacts are still going to be the same, catastrophic, like you've been mentioning. That Category 3 to 4 shift is only a 5-mile-per-hour difference with those peak wind speeds. That's it. It's still going to bring in a lot of surge, a lot of wind, and a lot of very heavy rainfall. And yes, we are very close to Idalia making landfall as that very strong center is getting much, much closer to the coastline right there along the Big Bend of Florida, just southeast of Tallahassee. And look at all of that intense rainfall wrapped around that very strong center. That's how we know this is a strong hurricane. It's keeping that compact shape even as it approaches landfall. So here we are, just over the next hour or so. We are expecting the core of this storm to make it onto land. But again, the impact is going to be felt across the entire state, stretching from Tallahassee and then all the way over into northeastern Florida, where they could be dealing with some severe weather on top of all the wind and also the rainfall. And then this storm, it's going to continue inland as we go throughout the rest of the day here. All of this red and orange showing the very heavy rain that will spread out across Georgia and then up into portions of the coastal Carolinas by 5 o'clock this evening. So the impact from this hurricane is going to be felt even as it weakens all the way off to the north and east over the coming hours. So this is going to quickly turn into a heavy rainfall event and a very concerning situation for the coastal Carolinas and parts of Georgia as we go throughout the rest of the day. But here in the short term anyway, the main impact, what you're seeing here is the storm surge right along the coast of Florida. Everywhere there is red on this map. And as we zoom in a lot closer here, that is 12 feet or more of surge. We're already seeing this in coastal portions of Florida right there along the Big Bend. And yes, that is life-threatening storm surge that will cut off those barrier islands and make parts of the state impassable right along the coastline. So in the short term, that is one of the main impacts we are seeing from this hurricane. Then this will turn into a heavy rainfall and also severe weather event inland through the rest of the day.
All right, Damon, thank you very much again for checking in with us. We'll check in with you a little later on. We have more to come here. Meteorologist Damon Matson. I always like to put things in perspective. You see a guy walking behind Ryan there, people paddle boarding down the block. And then at the other end of this is the historic catastrophic flood surge or storm surge that we could see in parts of Florida, where we're telling people this could be deadly. Don't take it lightly.
Yeah, exactly right. As we are just seeing the widespread impact. Some areas not hit as hard, others certainly are. And we just got word that it looks like Idalia has made landfall near Keaton Beach, Florida, as of 7:54 Eastern time. So the center of this storm, the eye wall of this hurricane, finally crossing into land there. And again, that's near Keaton Beach, just south of Perry, Florida. So we now have official landfall with Hurricane Idalia as it continues to bring those extreme impacts along the Big Bend of Florida, mainly with that 16 feet, up to 16 feet of storm surge, very heavy rainfall. These tight bands right now are producing some blinding rain as well as those extreme wind gusts with this storm. Again, Category 3 up to potentially 125 miles an hour. And now we're going to see the center of this storm move inland across portions of Florida and then eventually into the rest of the southeast as we move along with time, slowly weakening here. So we have landfall just before 8 a.m. Eastern time here. And as we move forward here the rest of the afternoon, it stays at hurricane strength as it crosses across portions of coastal Georgia. And then eventually, by the time we get into the overnight hours tonight and into the day tomorrow, this will become a tropical storm. Yes, weakening, but bringing widespread impacts to portions of the coastal Carolinas and then moving offshore as we progress along into the upcoming weekend. And we're talking about the storm surge, the wind at this current moment with this extreme hurricane. But now, one of the primary concerns we have, heavy rainfall as this hurricane moves inland the rest of the day today.
We're almost out of time. Can you just talk about how strong the winds are right now with landfall?
Yeah, the wind speeds are still up to 100 to 125 miles an hour, depending on where you're at in that eye wall. So still a Category 3 strength.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Damon.
Yeah, still extremely powerful. We are
Where Stephanie is. Meteorologist Damon Matson is with us once again. In terms of strength, we've talked about how strong the winds are. Just repeating for our viewers exactly how damaging a Category 3 hurricane could be.
Yeah, Adrian and Marky. Yeah, that Category 3, that's the wind speeds there. And again, that's 100 to 125 miles an hour. That's what the peak wind speeds were sustained at as Idalia made landfall just about a little over 45 minutes ago. But right near the center of the storm, we've been talking about it, the heavy rainfall, the pelting wind, that very strong wind, as well as the storm surge. But this is a wide spanning hurricane, as we do have impacts being felt all the way up into northeastern Florida. These outer bands producing some severe weather as well. But there is a very good look at that eye wall. Places like Perry right now really feeling the impact of that blinding rainfall, the strong winds, and that center is going to continue to move northeast and cross Interstate 10 within a matter of an hour or an hour and a half or so. But here is part of that other threat that still comes along with Idalia now as we go more into the day. The yellow you see here is the heightened risk for severe weather now inland into places in Georgia, South Carolina, right up the coast into North Carolina the rest of the day as well. So the threats from this storm are far from over now that it has made landfall, as we'll watch the center of this storm stay at hurricane strength but move inland into places like Valdosta, Georgia, up the coast towards Savannah, and then into coastal South Carolina as well. And as this continues to weaken, it's still going to bring about major impact to some of those inland communities in the southeast, coastal areas of the Carolinas. A lot of heavy rainfall that likely leads to flooding, as well as still that threat of wind and power outages. So no question about it, at this current moment, Florida is feeling the brunt of this storm, but we're going to now see the impact spread off to the north and east. And here we are at 10 o'clock tonight. Look at all of that heavy rainfall and still some outer bands that could produce some severe weather back into portions of the Carolinas. So this is definitely going to be a very highly impactful storm, not just in Florida, but across the rest of the southeast as well. And talking about that rainfall here too, again, this is going to move inland, and where you see a swath here of dark reds and purple, that's possibly up to 6 inches of very flooding rainfall as we move forward with time. So sending it back to you, Adrian, this storm far, far from done.
Yeah, we're just getting started, and hundreds of flights canceled. Of course, they've shut down a number of airports because of those winds. St. Pete, Clearwater, Sarasota, Tallahassee, and Tampa airports closed, according to the FAA. Also, Amtrak lines affected. Those are halted at this time. Damon, thank you so much. We want to check right in with our meteorologist.
Yeah, Damon Matson, let's bring you in. What's the latest on your radar in terms of Idalia's strength? And we know that it has officially made landfall at Keaton Beach.
Yeah, exactly right. It made landfall a little over an hour ago, and we are now going to see this hurricane technically weaken, but the catastrophic impacts are still going to be felt for several more hours in Florida and then up into portions of the southeast. There is that very strong eye wall once again. It has been impacting areas like Perry and now up into Madison with those extreme wind gusts of over 100 miles an hour, that blinding rainfall, and yes, still along some of the coastal areas to the south. We are still experiencing and seeing that storm surge, some just incredible images coming out of those coastal communities. And now, as we move forward with time, this is going to impact Georgia and the Carolinas with that flooding rainfall and wind in the coming hours.
Yeah, a lot of people in this path. Damon, thanks so much. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back.
Talk a little bit more about this. Meteorologist Damon Matson. Damon, always like to keep it real with viewers. We're not trying to scare anybody, but we certainly don't want people to take it for granted either.
No, definitely not. And that's where those live pictures coming in from our reporters there really do mean so much. You can see the surge, you can see the wind and the rainfall and just all of the damage that this hurricane is bringing, even as it's technically weakening now down to just a Category 2 storm. But look at the core of this hurricane. It's still holding strong now as it's pretty much up to the Interstate 10 corridor and over the community of Madison, now toward that Florida-Georgia line there. We still have that very intense band of rainfall, lightning, and just damaging wind gusts still in excess of 100 miles an hour. And that's the key point here, too. Florida is seeing the direct impact from this hurricane right now. But as we go throughout the rest of the day, we're going to see those impacts spread inland across southeastern Georgia up towards Savannah. And then eventually what's left of this hurricane, likely weakening into a tropical storm, it's still going to bring excessive amounts of rainfall and some of that surge from the inland wind direction along the coasts of South and North Carolina. This is 10 o'clock tonight. And look at all of that heavy rain expanding out to the east across the Outer Banks before this storm finally starts to pull away later in the day tomorrow. And we cannot emphasize enough the fact that despite where that center is, off to the east, there is a heightened severe threat as we have noticed an increased risk for that severe weather across portions of the Carolina coastline. And on top of that, this rainfall is going to bring problems to inland areas of Georgia, South and North Carolina, where you see all of these pinks, whites even. That is over 6 inches of rain that could fall over some inland communities in parts of the southeast the rest of today and tomorrow as well. Let's send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Damon, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much for the update. Let's welcome now meteorologist Damon Matson to get an update on where this storm is and the conditions right now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kelly. Yeah, and those images coming out of some of those locations in Florida really, again, telling the story of the impact and how this hurricane is still going to leave a mark for the rest of the day, even though its center continues off to the north and east. Look at all of these rain bands wrapping around the backside of this here. That is likely to produce some severe weather across northeastern Florida, now up into Georgia as well. And that's also the wind carrying in some of that storm surge still along coastal areas near the Big Bend. But the center of this storm, again, it is showing signs of weakening, now down to a Category 2 hurricane, but we still have that core of very intense wind, rainfall going on as it crosses Interstate 10, and now we're starting to see that center move into southern Georgia. Valdosta about to feel the brunt of that eye wall as it continues to move inland with time. So here we are. Wind speeds, again, down to 105 miles an hour. Those are the peak wind speeds with this storm. We still have some gusts a little bit below that will definitely still be destructive at times. And this will continue at hurricane strength as we go into the early afternoon. Eventually, by tonight, it does drop down to tropical storm strength, but the impacts are not lessened by any means as this storm then becomes a problem for coastal areas of Georgia near Savannah, Charleston, and then eventually, even as it curves out to sea, there will be impact felt along the North Carolina coastline as we go into the day tomorrow. And we can't emphasize enough, this is a storm surge threat, but it also brings about that heavy rainfall and those very gusty winds throughout here. There's the core of this storm here, all the red and the orange producing that heavy rainfall as it moves up the coastline past Savannah toward Charleston. And there are some low-lying areas there along the Carolina coastline that will feel the brunt of this storm, and that heavy rain expands into places like Charlotte, Raleigh, and up toward the Outer Banks with Virginia Beach in line to receive some of that rainfall there as well. Even as this storm falls apart, it's going to bring about those major impacts with due time. And yes, we're tracking this throughout the rest of the day, partially because eastern areas of the Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina coastline, where you see orange and yellow here, that's that heightened risk for severe weather as we go into the afternoon and the rest of the day, because this storm could spawn tornadoes on top of everything else. That's something we're keeping a close eye on. And there's that rainfall we've been talking about stretching now inland through Georgia, parts of the Carolinas. All of this purple, pink, and white you're seeing here, that is upwards of 6 inches, possibly closer to 10 inches of localized rainfall that is going to cause some major flooding along inland areas of Georgia and the Carolinas. So, Kelly, we are far from done with this storm, even as it begins to weaken the rest of the day today.
Yeah, we certainly are, Damon. You know, we talk a lot about wind speeds. We talk about the storm surge and the rainfall. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sustained winds at this hour and the devastating impacts those can have as well?
Yeah, the sustained winds here are in excess of 100 miles per hour near where that eye wall is along Interstate 10. So portions of the panhandle of Florida into Georgia now will be seeing those destructive wind gusts. But even as you expand out, you could still get gusts in excess of 50 miles an hour well outside of that eye wall. So yes, the destructive winds going to continue to be a problem over the next several hours here today.
All right, meteorologist Damon Matson, thank you so much. We will be checking back in. Joining us now with more, Rob Heron. Hurricane Idalia having devastating effects all across the state of Florida. Let's welcome now meteorologist Damon Matson to get an update on where this storm is and what conditions are like right now. Damon?
Yeah, Kelly, we've been tracking this hurricane all morning long, watching it waver in strength at times, but the impacts continue to hold as they are going across Florida, Georgia, now into the Carolinas. Everybody experiencing the brunt of this storm. Here is the center of Idalia. It's now moving into the state of Georgia as we speak. Valdosta experiencing the heaviest rainfall, likely some of those leftover extremely powerful wind gusts along the very side of that eye wall right there as well. And this is well after it made landfall with winds up to 125 miles an hour right along the coast of Florida. And there's a closer view here. Again, crossed through Madison into Valdosta now. So southern Georgia really feeling the brunt of the center of this storm. But not just around the center is where those impacts are being felt. All across portions of the southeast, we are seeing the damage wrought by the winds, the heavy rainfall, as well as the possibility of some severe weather. Thus far, rainfall totals, wow, this is just insane right here. We have some estimated totals here just to the east of Tallahassee coming in. Anywhere you see purple, that is over 6 inches of rain from that consistent band activity going on right along the center of this storm. And like you just heard a few minutes ago, it's not just near the center where the impacts are being felt. And that is something to keep in mind as we check out this track here going into the afternoon. It looks like Idalia is still going to hold at hurricane strength at least through the afternoon as it moves into Savannah and then past Charleston, South Carolina. By tonight, it likely does drop back down to tropical storm strength, but cannot emphasize enough, that does not mean the impacts are over, as we will continue to see very heavy rainfall and some of that wind across the Carolinas, at least through tomorrow, at least until this storm finally does go back out to sea as we go into the upcoming weekend. So here is that latest track here on Futurecast, really showing that heavy rainfall as it continues off to the north and east. Places like Augusta, inland toward Columbia, South Carolina, going to feel the brunt of Idalia later this afternoon into the evening. And then that heavy rain continues to expand off to the north and east into North Carolina. Places like Raleigh and Charlotte going to feel the brunt of this storm later today. So we are far from done, even though Idalia's made landfall and technically is weakening. The impacts will continue the rest of the day today.
Yeah, they certainly will, Damon. All right, thank you so much.
Where St. Petersburg, Gulfport, Shore Acres, Gandy Boulevard, all of those areas right now experiencing extreme storm surge and flooding. And with king tides, it could only get worse.
Well, you know, Ryan, I know you've been all over this area. Just curious as to some of the precautions people are taking and how have they worked to protect their homes, some of the buildings and businesses where you are right now?
Let me show you off to my side here in terms of what some folks have been doing. You can see this home right next to me, 1501 here on Bayshore. You can see sandbags up against that garage. So folks did kind of prepare in terms of putting sandbags up, trying to do whatever they could to stop the water from coming in. But clearly, as you can tell, it's not going to do much for homes like this one that's on the top. Good to see this person, by the way, was able to kind of back out of what was really, really deep waters here. But that's what some of the folks have done in this area. They've gotten their sandbags. They've been able to prepare as best as they can for some of the really, really high waters that we've seen. But as I mentioned, Kelly, it's only expected to get worse with king tide. So folks here are doing what they can to hunker down. Some are coming out to kind of survey the area. But as officials have said, please don't drive. Please don't drive in these waters. It's a recipe for getting stuck. And as you mentioned, at the top of the show, the 2 confirmed deaths that we have related to this storm have been from folks on the road through these conditions. So please, heed the warnings from officials, especially as king tides are still on the way here in the Gulf Coast area of Tampa Bay.
Certainly. And, people traveling across those roads also pushing water into areas where people are trying to keep it out. Ryan Bass, thank you so much for that update. Let's welcome now meteorologist Damon Matson to get an update on where the storm is right now, what conditions look like. Damon?
Yeah, Kelly. Well, great advice. As a matter of fact, there are live reporters in the field showing everyone what is going on with the impact from this storm. And we mentioned it. It's down to a Category 1 hurricane at this point. But that does not mean the impact is over, especially for inland portions of the southeast. Now, there's the core of Hurricane Idalia. It's moved all the way across the state line into southern Georgia at this point. But again, places in Florida still a long ways from being in the clear as we continue to see some of that onshore wind flow that's pushing in those high tides and that storm surge. It's down along the areas near the Big Bend and even southward there where that onshore wind is going to continue for the next few hours into high tide. So we will see that onshore flow lead to that storm surge flooding here in due time. And then off to the north and east along the outer bands, we've had multiple tornado warnings coming in. Severe weather, heavy rainfall continues to be a risk as well. So even though this storm is weakening, the impacts are far from done. There we have it. That latest update from the National Hurricane Center drops it down to a Category 1. Peak wind gusts near that center are around 90 miles per hour at this point, but you're still getting gusts in excess of 50 miles an hour well outside of the center as this storm continues along its track. The center of the storm likely to make it to Savannah, Georgia by this afternoon, and then eventually by this evening over portions of coastal South Carolina near Charleston, Myrtle Beach. And then as we go into the day tomorrow, it will drift out to sea once again as a tropical storm, but not before it does bring some immense impact into South Carolina, North Carolina, and also the coast of Georgia. What we have here in the yellow, orange, that's that heightened risk for severe weather, in particular tornadoes, as we go throughout the rest of the afternoon. So that is one threat that we will see along the coastline there through Savannah, Myrtle Beach, and into Charleston, South Carolina. And all of the heavy rain that is associated around the center of this storm and into the outer bands, that continues here as we move through the rest of the day today. We're talking 5 o'clock. Most of that heavy rainfall now into Augusta and South Carolina there. And then this rain continues off to the north and east, and there could be some flooding rainfall into portions of North Carolina near Charlotte, Raleigh, over toward the Outer Banks along the eastern shore of North Carolina there. So, yes, this storm system is far from done as we go throughout the rest of the day today and down to the south until that wind direction changes. That storm surge flooding is also going to continue. Here's a very good look at that rainfall that we could end up seeing now through Georgia and the Carolinas. Anywhere you see pink, purple, and white, that is 6 inches plus of rainfall, and that is going to come down at a very quick rate that could lead to flash flooding. So that is going to be a major concern moving forward. So, Kelly, as we send it back to you, we still have a long ways to go with Idalia the rest of the day today.
We certainly do. Meteorologist Damon Matson, thank you. Storm deaths have been confirmed. That is the very latest. You're looking at the Sanibel Causeway there. You can see those waves crashing onto the side of the road. Let's bring in meteorologist Damon Matson to get an update on the track of the storm at this hour. Damon.
Yeah, Kelly, unfortunate to hear that news of the 2 storm-related deaths right there. We knew this storm was going to bring heavy impact. Hopefully, that is all we're going to hear about in terms of a loss of life the rest of the day. But the impact from this storm is still being felt. That's why we continue to track it throughout the rest of the day here. There's the center. Again, this hurricane is weakening, but it is holding that core of very strong wind gusts up to 90 miles an hour now into parts of southern Georgia, and a lot of very heavy rainfall still ongoing. Flash flood emergency issued just a short time ago in Valdosta, where they picked up over 4 inches of rain in a very short period of time. That is the immense power this storm still has. And it's not just near the center. We are still concerned with the outer bands of this storm as we still have an onshore flow causing that storm surge down along coastal portions of Florida. And now as this moves north and east, we're seeing the threat for severe weather and also some storm surge move into coastal portions of Georgia and the Carolinas now as we move into the afternoon. So yes, the category continues to go down as the storm weakens, if you will, with those wind speeds down to just 90 miles an hour. But the impacts are not going to stop anytime soon here. This is likely to hold as a hurricane at least through the rest of the afternoon today before finally dropping to tropical storm strength over the Carolinas later on tonight. And it will eventually move offshore as we head into the start of the weekend. But before that can happen, we're going to experience those impacts across the Georgia and the Carolinas, at least through Thursday. Here's a look at that severe weather threat once again, all of the yellow and orange highlighting the heightened threat for severe weather and mostly tornadoes from this system as some of those outer bands move onshore. You get those spin-ups, and that can be just as destructive as the center of the hurricane itself here. And how about all of this rainfall the rest of the afternoon moving into the evening? We don't lose any of that tropical moisture and heavy rainfall as it nudges north and east into Augusta, Columbia, South Carolina, and inland portions of North Carolina will also be feeling the brunt of that heavy rainfall through tonight and into the start of Thursday morning, with the Outer Banks and parts of Virginia Beach potentially even seeing a little bit of that heavy rainfall early tomorrow morning. So yes, we continue to keep our eye on that storm surge threat in Florida for the next several hours. But here is our next biggest concern as we move through the rest of the day today. This forecasted rainfall anywhere you have the purples, the pinks, and even whites on occasion on this map. That is excessive flooding rainfall over 6 inches across a large swath of Georgia and the Carolinas here. So that's going to also be a concern of ours as we move through the rest of the day. But Kelly, I'll send it back to you. We'll keep an eye on this storm as we move through the rest of the day.
All right, meteorologist Damon Matson, thank you for the latest on the radar. Joining us now for more, Tom Rohn. He is the Vice President of Corporate Engagement at Direct Relief. Tom, thank you so much for being here. You know,